Hello, and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. That sound means we're going to have some fun. After 3 days of fundraising, it's time to have a little bit of fun. And I remember a while ago seeing Friday the 13th coming up on the schedule, and I said to Edgar, we got to do Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. So that's what that music is, Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin theme music. It is Friday the 13th, a perfect day. I have no idea how Friday the 13th came to be an odd day or an unusual day, but a perfect day for some Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. Jimmy, of course, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, and a really good fundraiser because we met our match yesterday, and it was close, but a big outpouring at the end of the day. So thanks to everybody for helping us have a successful pledge drive. Hi, Jimmy.
Welcome back. Thank you. How's it going?
Pretty good. All in all, I'm feeling pretty good. When we meet those goals, that's an awful nice feeling.
It's a big relief.
Yeah, big relief. Yeah.
Something I think people don't realize is how stressful fundraising is for people like you and me.
Yeah, it is. And it's always surprising me how tired I am after it. I'm like, well, it's not like digging ditches or anything, but somehow it takes it out of you. So again, I just couldn't be more grateful. Thank you to everybody. Friday the 13th, I thought it was a perfect day for Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
But you don't feel like it's bad luck. You feel like we're okay.
A few years ago, this was when I was living in San Diego. I was doing some redecorating, and I went down to a local shopping mall that had an Asian store, like furniture store. And I went in because I'd seen that they had those food dragons or food dogs that are kind of ornate statuettes made out of something that at least looks like jade. I think they're actually probably just green glass, but they look really cool. And so I wanted to get a pair of them. And so I went into the store, and it was run by a very nice elderly Chinese gentleman. And I picked out the food dogs I wanted, and I was getting ready to pay for them. And he was telling me all about the proper placement of them in order to ensure good luck. And I explained to him, it's like, I'm not so much a believer in luck, but I don't think I was getting through to him because he kept going about the best place to put him for good luck.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to get your placement right. In some cultures, you got to get your placement right, or it produces a lot of anxiety. I'm with you. I don't feel too worried on a Friday the 13th or going under a ladder or seeing a black cat.
I've lived through lots of Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
I've never had a problem.
All right. Let me get to some questions here. We've got all the questions are in. Usually people have all kinds of fascinating questions that they will email to Jimmy or get to Jimmy through social media one way or another. And we start with Sophie P., who says, somebody's typing on it while I'm trying to read it. How do we grapple with the Eastern Orthodox theology that aliens would be considered demons? Sophie says, I think the idea is largely from Fr Seraphim Rose, although he's quite contentious in Orthodox circles, and I have many friends who dislike him a lot and others who consider him better than basically every saint. All right, Sophie, thank you.
Okay, well, I know just a little about Seraphim Rose. He was an Eastern Orthodox priest in the 20th century. He passed on to his reward in 1982, so he hasn't been with us for a while. And I don't know what he may have said about aliens being demons and so forth. I'm also not sure how common that idea is in Eastern Orthodox circles. I'm pretty sure that none of the individual churches that are part of the Eastern Orthodox Communion have adopted that as an official position. But it wouldn't surprise me that there are individual Eastern Orthodox who have advocated this idea, just like there are, the Catholic Church hasn't adopted this either as an official position, but there are various Catholics who adopt it.
Yeah.
But in terms of how to grapple with the idea that aliens would be considered demons, Well, I would simply say the same thing to Eastern Orthodox that I say to Catholics. Where's your evidence? I'm happy to entertain the idea that demons might be masquerading as aliens, and maybe there are no other intelligent beings in our universe, so any apparent aliens are all demons. I'm happy to entertain the possibility, but simply saying it so doesn't make it so. And if you want me to believe something, you need to give me evidence for it. Whoever is making a claim and want someone else to change their mind, my current mind being, I don't know if they even exist, much less that they're demons. So I'm wide open on this question. But if you want me to change my mind and say, oh, they do exist and they're all demons, well, then you need to give me some evidence. You shoulder the burden of proof for that. And I'm going to be open, but I'm also going to be a little bit suspicious, because there have been loads of occasions in the past where people leapt to the conclusion that demons were responsible for something, and it turned out to be absolutely false. In fact, people have even died because people leapt to the demon hypothesis without sufficient evidence. A while back, I did an episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World on the question of, is it always demons whenever you encounter something you don't understand? And it was episode 188 for people who'd like to look it up. But I began the episode with like 6 or 7 news accounts of children who had been killed accidentally because their parents thought that they were demon possessed. And all of these stories were just from the 2 years leading up to that episode. And what these parents had done, and these were not Catholic exorcisms, but what these parents had done is decided, my 2-year-old's throwing a temper tantrum, they must be demon possessed, and we better do a home exorcism. So we'll just hold our child's head under the water faucet and use hot water to drive the demon out of our child. And multiple children have been killed that way. So that's an illustration of how leaping to the demon hypothesis whenever you don't have sufficient evidence is destructive. So I would like to see evidence for this. And I would note that I've already got some not conclusive, but notable evidence that points in a different direction from reported alien encounters. Now, I don't know if any of these reported alien encounters actually involve aliens, but what I do notice is that the aliens reported in the encounters don't try to get worshipped as pagan gods. They don't try to possess people. They don't try to spread false theological ideas. So they're not doing the stuff that demons historically have been known to do. And that would point us away from the idea that they're demons if they're not doing demon stuff. So I'm totally open here, but if you want me to believe something, you need to show me evidence. And thus far, I have not seen good evidence on this one. I've seen a lot of claims, and I've even debated the astronomer Hugh Ross, who is an advocate of the alien demon hypothesis. I also have an episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World where I go through a book he wrote and critique the arguments that he uses, and I don't find them conclusive, but I'm still open.
Sophie P., thanks very much for the question for this Friday the 13th. And Jimmy mentioned a couple times Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, one of the most popular documentary podcasts out there, hundreds of episodes available. If you've never listened, boy, do you have some exciting times ahead of you, because there's hundreds of great episodes. A new one drops each Friday morning. So what dropped this morning, Jimmy, on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World?
Well, I'll let you know. First, though, I want to mention I was just able to look up in what episode do I respond to the arguments that Hugh Ross has used for the demon hypothesis for aliens. It's episode 281, so 281. That was a while back, though. Today, we had episode 404 come out. And unlike on the internet, 404 does not mean that we couldn't find the episode. In fact, we have the episode, and it's about a very well attested ghost story in Tracy, California, up in the Bay Area. There is essentially today it's like a bar and grill that has been around since the 1800s. It's called the Banta Inn. And in 1968, the owner of the Banta Inn, one of the owners, passed on to his reward. And subsequently, numerous people, including people who did not know him, reported seeing him and could pick him out of photo lineups. There have been numerous witnesses to his haunting the Banta Inn, and some of the phenomena has even been captured on camera. And so I interview one of the principal investigators of the Banta Inn, and we show you the footage.
Oh, exciting. Check it out at mysterious.fm or on Jimmy's YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. Let's take a quick break and come back with more weird questions. We got a lot of weird questions. I get to do some reading coming up, and then Jimmy will give us his sometimes weird answers, sometimes not so weird answers. We'll find out right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Check out EWTN's official YouTube channel.
Just follow the link on our homepage at EWTN.com or go to YouTube.com/EWTN.
Watch EWTN's live shows or today's homily from the Daily Mass.
Click the upload button to see our most recent clips.
You can also find all of EWTN YouTube content by clicking the playlist button.
It's all on the official EWTN YouTube channel at YouTube.com/EWTN.
Visit today.
Yeah, you know what that music means when we've got that special theme music playing. It's Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin. That's always a fun way to spend a Friday, and that's just exactly what we're doing today. I've got a whole bunch of weird questions in front of me, and I'll pick them out and read them as I go, and Jimmy will give us answers. This one, Jimmy was just telling me, just came in today, and because Thomas knew that we were having weird questions today. So nice, good on you, Thomas, for knowing what was up today. And this is Thomas's question. Hello. Thank you for taking the time to read my email. I watched your video, Could You Marry an Alien? And I found it to be quite comprehensive in answering that question. But now I have a question on whether the exact same principles for real life need to be followed in a fictional story. I've been reading a serialized science fiction story by an Anglican author. In the story, a relationship starts to develop between a human male and a humanoid female alien. I've talked with the author about his plans for the story, and while most of the criteria have been met, being with a rational soul, will be baptized later in the story, the author decided to treat the ability to have children as the same as an infertile human couple. Is that an okay approach for a fictional story, or should real-life principles be applied? He has also discussed another potential solution, potentially objectionable idea, having sci-fi technology be capable of allowing interspecies couples to reproduce. Is this a viable solution, provided that it works like acceptable fertility treatments instead of IVF, cloning, or any other unnatural intrusion? Or is this also bad? Can the same principles be applied to humanoid fantasy creatures as to aliens?
Okay, so I'm not sure precisely which video of Thomas has watched. I've answered the variations on this question a number of times. But one of the things that I point out, other than I don't know if aliens even exist, which people seem to forget for some reason. But one of the things I often point out is there is no definitive answer on this question. It would take an act of the magisterium to answer the question of whether a human could marry an alien and what kind of alien and things like that. So we're in a realm of theological opinion. And some theologians would say that their opinion is if you can't breed together, you're different species and you can't get married. Now, you might be infertile, like two humans who are past the age of childbearing or who have other fertility issues. And you could get married then because you're the same species then. But if you're two fundamentally different species, you shouldn't be getting married, not in the real world. On the other hand, other theologians wouldn't be so quick to say that, because the classic definition of what a human is a rational animal. And any intelligent aliens we found would be rational animals. And so, they didn't know about DNA back whenever, and people can have DNA incompatibilities. What they did know about is man is a rational animal. And so if you met an alien that's also a rational animal from some classic Christian and Catholic perspectives, that would be a man. It might be a man with a different biology than us, but it's the same. It goes in the same category according to this other opinion as a human being, because it's another rational animal. And so we shouldn't allow the modern biological definition to trump the philosophical or theological definition of what a human is from this perspective. So I can see theologians going both ways on this. And so that's what I commonly point out whenever I answer this question. When it comes to what Thomas is asking about, if you can, I assume he's exploring the idea of you could marry a rational animal alien in real life. I assume he's exploring that opinion. Could you do the same thing in a fictionalized story? Well, Cy Kellett, why don't you help me out? If you can do something in real life, can you depict it in fiction?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if you could order a pizza in real life, could you write a story about someone ordering a pizza?
You got to start right in on the pizza so early in the show, Jimmy. All right. Yes, fine. You could order a pizza.
Okay, so I would say, given that this is an opinion that some people could hold, and it hadn't been condemned by the church, whether you buy that opinion, and I don't know that I do buy that opinion, but it would seem to me that it's defensible. You could mount a defense of it. And so you could explore a defensible opinion in fiction too. So I wouldn't have a problem reading about, Trip Tucker, a human male, marrying T'Pol, a Vulcan female, and, or Ambassador Sarek marrying Amanda Grayson and so forth. That happens all the time in fiction. So I don't see a problem with it. Now, Thomas goes on to ask, well, about reproductive issues. And here, there's a difference in the fictional representations of what happens. In Star Trek, Trip Tucker and T'Pol were not able to have a child without medical assistance. In fact, someone used their cells to come up with a child without their consent even. So that was clearly immoral. On the other hand, we have other hybridizations like Mr. Spock, who seems to, as far as we know, his parents didn't use any kind of medical technology to enable his conception. So it could be that humans and Vulcans sometimes are fertile and sometimes they're not. Okay. Thomas's first variation on this question is, could you depict in fiction a human and an alien getting married, even though they're not fertile, and treat it just like two infertile humans getting married. And my inclination, if we're exploring the path that they can get married at all, would be to say, yeah, if two humans are not fertile together and they can still get married, like because they're past the age of childbearing, or they have genetic incompatibilities, or they have, medical conditions that prevent them from being able to be fertile, then you could treat a human alien pairing the same way. If it's naturally infertile, but you can otherwise marry someone, then the same thing would apply. He then asks about, well, could you use medical technology to make it possible for them to have offspring? And if you could use medical technology that's licit to use on humans, you could use that same technology to enable a human and an alien to have a baby. On the other hand, I would actually be more concerned about watching or reading a fictional scenario where a human and an alien use medical technology to have a baby, because so many medical technologies like in vitro fertilization and cloning and things like that are not moral for humans to use. And so I would be concerned that in this case, there could be a scandal, meaning tempting someone into sin by making it seem like, oh, if I'm infertile, I can just use IVF or something like that.
Right.
And so I'd rather see the human and the alien get married and it not be an issue that they have a baby or they're not able to have a baby, rather than getting into the question of could you use medical technology to enable that, and what kind of medical technology could you use? Unless you really dig down on that latter question, I would say that you're posing a risk of scandal here. Whereas if they get married and have a baby with no problem, or if they get married and can't have a baby, you're not scandalizing anybody, because nobody's going to be marrying an alien in the foreseeable future anyway.
All right, Thomas, thank you very much for getting that question into us. I think we got time for another one before I have to take a break. So we'll go to John's question. John says, I understand vampires to be the antithesis of Christ, consuming blood to give themselves life, whereas Christ shed his blood to give us life. And this makes vampires evil. If they were real, how could they be evil, since they would be creations of God? It seems a paradox to me that they would be naturally evil. The evil act of consuming blood is in their nature, while being a creature of God.
Okay, well, so vampires, the way they're depicted in fiction, are humans, at least most of the time. They're humans who have become vampires, and their transition to vampirism requires them to eat blood. So this is, or consume blood. So this is not itself something that's part of their nature. It's something that's been added to their nature due to circumstances. It's kind of like you could have somebody who becomes a drug addict, and they become dependent on the drug so that they now must consume this drug in order to survive. Otherwise, let's say they'll have a heart attack and die. Well, it's not their nature as a human to consume this drug, but they have acquired a dependency on it because of circumstance. And in the same way, I would look at a vampire and say, if they were real, their nature as a human does not require them to eat blood, but they have become dependent on the consumption of blood by circumstance. And so this, I would say, would be a physical evil, just like drug addiction is a physical evil. So that's what I'd say as a first pass, but I think there are a couple of other passes here that are worth exploring. Cy Kellett, have you ever been to a swamp?
I've driven by a swamp. I mean,
have you ever been bit by, what do they call those little things that bite you and leave a big kind of red bump on you when they do it? What are those called? Mosquitoes.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever been bit by a mosquito?
Yeah, I have.
Why do you think the mosquito bit you?
I'm delicious, Jimmy. I am delicious.
Your
And they
flesh
wanted my
is
blood.
delicious, or some particular
Yeah,
part of you?
They wanted my blood.
They wanted your blood. And so mosquitoes are a creature that does exist in the real world and that is dependent on eating blood, and that is a creature of God. And so even though they may be annoying to humans, and even though they can carry diseases that are harmful to humans, mosquitoes are part of God's creation. But there's more to say here, and so we'll finish up on the other side of the break.
I hope we're coming back with a condemnation of mosquitoes, but we'll find out. Jimmy Akin, Weird Questions, Catholic Answers Live.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Throughout history, some Catholics have been among the worst kind of villains, right? Or were they? In Cancelled, historian Steve Weidenkopf digs into the lives and controversies of some of these Catholics whose reputations have been blackened, often unfairly. He takes on the anti-Catholic versions of history and defends not only these figures, but the faith they represent. Order your copy of Cancelled today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. I mean, mosquitoes are God's creatures. They're God's little creatures. But I would like an explanation at some point.
Okay.
I would like God to explain those mosquitoes to me at some point. But you were talking about vampires, Jimmy, and the mosquito is a vampire, really.
Right. So John was proposing that vampires are an antithesis to Christ. They consume blood in order to get themselves life. Well, mosquitoes do the same thing. And mosquitoes are God's creatures, and they're not intrinsically evil. You know, God didn't make anything that is evil. And so I think the lesson we can draw from that is that consuming blood is not evil. And it was forbidden for Jewish people to do it as part of the ceremonial aspect of the law of Moses, but other people didn't have a problem eating blood. Now, I personally find the idea of deliberately eating something made with blood gross, but that's because I didn't grow up doing it. Humans have an interesting relationship to what they find palatable and unpalatable. If you, as a child, eat something regularly, you're going to like it. And I saw a great illustration of this a number of years ago. There was a former employee of Catholic Answers, really great guy, who had decided he and his family were going to be vegetarians. Now, he later got a condition that required him to eat meat, so I interpreted that as God is teaching you, and you need to go in a different direction now. But during their vegetarian phase, I went over to their house and saw like their 2-year and 3-year-old begging for little pieces of lettuce, from a salad. And that would not have happened in the house I grew up in. I mean, we ate salads, but it was not begging food. But in his house it was, because that's what they were used to eating. The thing about humans is we're omnivores. So we can eat almost anything. Not quite as much as if we were from the planet Bismol, where Matter Eater Lad comes from in the Legion of Superheroes, but we can eat a wide range of things. And so the difficulty is we're born at some particular spot on the planet. But in addition to the things we can eat, there are going to be things we can't eat, because some things are poisonous to humans. And babies don't know the difference, And so babies need to be born with their food preferences wide open. Because there's your genetic code has no way of knowing which plants locally or which other things locally would be okay for you to eat or not. You need to be wide open, and the adults around you will get you to eat what is safe. But then as you start growing, you're less dependent on the adults. You start making more of your own decisions. And so at that point, now that you've learned the following foods are okay, you need your food preferences, which were wide open, to become very narrow to just the stuff that you've learned is safe. And that's why kids become picky eaters, because they weren't previously exposed to certain foods. And so now that their food preferences have narrowed to what they have learned is safe, they don't want to eat anything that's not on that list. And it requires effort and training to get them to move beyond what their initial food preferences were from this early phase. So in my house, being an American, we didn't grow up eating anything that was made with blood. But you know who does? Loads and loads and loads and loads of people around the world.
Yeah.
For example, if you go to Asia, they will have hot and sour soup that is made with blood. Now, I love hot. Yeah. I love hot and sour soup, but I don't love it if it's made with blood. And I prefer the Americanized hot and sour soup that is blood free. On the other hand, it's not far off exotic Asia that has blood food products. If you go to England, the principal country that, was involved in the founding of America, they have blood sausage.
That's why we left, I think.
Well, could be. But, eating blood is not just for mosquitoes, it's for humans too. And it's okay because number one, because we're not subject to the law of Moses. Nobody is these days. We're not ancient Israelites, and so we're not subject to the law of Moses. But also in particular in Mark 7, Jesus makes a point that nothing that enters your mouth makes you unclean. And Mark draws, the inspired author draws the inference, and since he's inspired, it's guaranteed to be correct, that Jesus thus declared all foods clean. This was written in an age when people who were not Jews, did eat blood just like people do today. So blood is on the approved for humans food list these days. It always has been. It's just that ancient Israelites were not supposed to eat it for ceremonial cleanliness reasons, or for ceremonial reasons, but we're not subject to that law anymore. So I would say that I commend John for thinking about this issue, but I think I disagree with his premise that that consuming blood would make vampires or mosquitoes or humans intrinsically evil.
John, thank you very much. A perfect question for today. Weird Questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. Here's one from Andrew. I enjoy listening to much of your content. I am wondering, does Jesus genetically resemble God in genotype and or phenotype? How about Mary? Thank you for considering answering my question.
Okay. So Andrew used a couple of words there that most folks aren't familiar with, genotype and phenotype. So we better define those so people will know what we're talking about. A phenotype is what you can say about an organism by observing it macroscopically. So I could look at the organism Psychelet and I could say that Psychelet has gray hair, and it looks like his eyes are blue or green, and he's probably between 5 and 6 feet tall, and he probably weighs more than 150 pounds, but not 250, I would guess.
Yeah, I appreciate that range. Thank you.
Yeah, and so in describing all those characteristics of Psychelet, I'm describing his phenotype.
Yeah, but
Psychelet, is your current hair color demanded by your DNA?
It is not.
Okay, how about your current eye color? Maybe not. Those eye color can change during life. How about your current height? If you had been nutritionally deprived growing up, would you be the same height?
No, I'd be a different height.
Okay, and how about your weight? If you had been nutritionally deprived, would you be a different weight?
No, it's 100% genes. I had nothing to do with. Yes, that's a variable. That one doesn't have to be what it is. Yeah.
So your genotype, that's your genes.
Yeah.
And so this illustrates the difference between what you are on the genetic level, which just can be effectively described as your genotype, versus what you observe when you look at an organism or examine an organism at a particular moment, and that's its phenotype. So here we're asking, do Jesus and Mary resemble God in either genotype or phenotype? So first question. Psychelet, is God an organism that we can observe and establish a phenotype?
No, he is not.
No. Therefore, prima facie, neither Jesus nor Mary would resemble God in phenotype.
Right.
Okay, now let's look at the other one. Genotype. Does God have a genetic code?
No.
So again, neither Jesus nor Mary would resemble God in terms of genetic code. At least that's how it would seem at first glance, because God doesn't have a genetic code, and so Jesus can't resemble him in a literal way. But might there be an analogical way that Jesus could resemble God on the genetic level? Well, people have different aptitudes that are based in part on their DNA. Some people, for example, are psychopaths, and psychopathy, which involves a dramatic lack of empathy, has a strong genetic component. On the other hand, Jesus, Psychelet, was he a psychopath?
He was not. I feel confident in saying
he was not a psychopath. He went to the cross in order to die for humanity. That displays, to my mind, remarkable empathy. As St. Paul says, someone might dare to die for a just man, but Jesus died for us while we were yet sinners. That's remarkably empathetic. So So I would say that that is a godly characteristic, though, that self-sacrificing empathy that Jesus displayed.
Right, right.
And so I would say, even though God doesn't have genes, to the extent that Jesus's genes assisted him in manifesting the self-sacrificial empathy that he displayed, that or any other characteristic that was godly that Jesus displayed, that you could analogically say, not that he resembles God in genotype, but that he has elements in his genotype that that enabled him to display characteristics of God in a human way. So I would say that there's a kind of analogical similarity there. God doesn't literally have a genotype, but Jesus had a genotype that enabled him as a human to display certain godly characteristics that did show a resemblance to God.
Andrew, thank you for that fascinating question. That brings us right to the break.
Same thing for Mary.
Okay. And Andrew, that'll do it for that. We'll be right back with more Jimmy Akin weird questions. We got a whole bunch of them. Lots more coming up on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul, and that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come? At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
He was a Jesuit, a cardinal, and a doctor of the Church.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Robert Bellarmine is honored for his immense contributions to theology, including helping to draft 2 important catechisms that defended church teachings during the Protestant Revolt. Pope Clement VIII named Bellarmine a cardinal because, as the Pope put it, Bellarmine had not his equal for learning.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back. Happy Friday the 13th to you. We thought Friday the 13th, at least I thought, be a good day to ask a lot of weird questions of Jimmy Akin. And that is exactly what we are doing today. A whole bunch of weird questions for Jimmy. This one comes from Saberlike659. Saberlike says, is it okay for one to hold the view that the tree of life from the Kabbalah is a valid conception of God without straying from the doctrinal belief in the Trinity? Like, if God is so beyond the realm of human comprehension, in the sense of the story of the blind men and the elephant, where we as mortals don't possess the capacity to conceptualize God in his totality, is it valid to explore other conceptions of the role God plays in the world without straying into heretical territory, so long as you still hold on to the traditional categorization of the Trinity as well?
Okay, so I definitely agree that we can't fully conceptualize God. He is to use the term from medieval philosophy, he is incomprehensible. We cannot comprehend him. We can't put our intellectual arms around him and figure out everything about God. He exceeds our ability to fully comprehend. But he has revealed to us that he is a Trinity, and we can understand enough about the Trinity to see how that's possible, although it's not something we could deduce on our own. He has to reveal it to us. He has to tell us about it. What about alternative ways of thinking about God? Well, I'll mention this before I specifically get to the Kabbalistic tree of life. Well, I think it's certainly possible to have alternative conceptions of God. You do need to hold on to the doctrine of the Trinity because God's revealed that that's true. If you want to use alternative conceptualizations of God, well, I think that up to a point that can be done because we see that in Scripture. Like, at one point, at many points, God compares himself to a king. Jesus, in his parables, compares him to a landowner. The prophets in the Old Testament actually even use feminine metaphors for God sometimes. Like even if a mother can no more forget her children than even if she did, I wouldn't forget you. Or delighting in the breasts of God. There's a passage like that. And so like a baby delights in the breasts of its mother. So there are alternative conceptualizations that express truths about God. However, and so those are legitimate. I don't have a problem with those. But I do think that we need to be very careful here, because if we're getting into an area that we don't know that much about, precisely because God is not fully comprehensible. We cannot fully understand God as human beings. And we run a great risk of saying something false about God if we get too adventurous into this territory. Sticking with some basic metaphors, that's okay. But when we're talking about the Trinity and something on that level, I don't want to move beyond what's safe. Having said that, with that as a caution, what about the tree of life from Kabbalah? Well, so people may have seen this. You often see it depicted as a kind of diagram. It does look kind of like a tree. It's not, it doesn't have leaves and stuff. But it's got a group of, the way it's typically depicted, a group of circles that are connected by lines, and it looks vaguely tree-like. And the different circles, there's 10 of them, they're known as sphirot. And they represent different aspects of God or different divine attributes. And so, okay, well, God has a number of different divine attributes, and if you can put them together in a kind of schematic that makes sense of how they're connected, well, that's fine with me. But the way the tree of life is commonly understood in Kabbalah, I think there are some problems that I think would rule it out for an Orthodox Christian, because one of the things that Kabbalists will say is that God's, if I can put it this way, his energy sort of moves from one of the sphirot to another. And that I'm getting hinky about, to quote Joe Friday, because I think we're at risk of oversimplification and possibly falsification if we're talking about God's energy moving from one of his attributes to another. By the way, the non-Kabbalistic Judaism is sometimes critical of the tree of life. And there are even Jews who would say things, and Saber-like 659 makes a good point in talking about it in relation to the Trinity, because there are Jews who have said, hey, we're supposed to be monotheists, and Christians only have 3, you've got 10. So that's a source of some dispute in the Jewish community. Having said that, I think we're in an area where we know so little that it's easy to oversimplify or even falsify things. But my real problem is this. In Kabbalah, at least as it's classically understood, the world is broken. Now, that much, look out a window, you can tell that. But in Kabbalah, the explanation for why the world is broken is because of the tree of life. That as the energy flows from one sphirot to another, it creates so much energy that it causes breakage. And so it's like God can't properly handle all of his own energies, and that results in the world being broken. And so in Kabbalah, one of the big goals and one of the things that humans are supposed to do is participate in tikkun olam, or the repair of the world. So the idea is that the brokenness of the world is something that's intrinsic to the divine nature, and we're kind of here to help God out by repairing the world that is broken because of God's nature. It's like, okay, this articulation of the tree of life is not going to fly from a Christian perspective. By the way, Saber-like, if you'd like to learn more about Kabbalah from including a Christian perspective on it, I've got a couple of episodes of Mysterious World that deal with it. They're episodes 218 and 219, so 218 and 219. In them, I interview a Jewish scholar named Justin Sledge. He's not himself a Kabbalist, but he is very familiar with Kabbalistic thought, and he presents it, and I end up offering some Christian perspective. So check out episodes 218 and 219 of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World for more.
Saber-like, thank you very much. A brief question, a short question from Andrew, Jimmy. He wants to know, if there were no fall, would philosophy exist?
Okay, you can help me out with this one. So philosophy, the word comes from Greek roots. Philia means love, and Sophia means wisdom. So if our first parents had never fallen, would humans love wisdom?
Yes.
Yeah.
They would still, yes.
At least if you're defining philosophy based on its word parts, I would say, yeah, philosophy would still exist. In fact, we'd be better philosophers if we had never fallen than we are now. On the other hand, words are not defined simply in terms of where their word parts come from. If they were, then the word nice, which comes from the Latin word necius, would mean ignorant or foolish. Necius, it's got that ne, which is a negation on it, and skia, it's from the same root as science or knowing. And so when you tell Missy, that's a nice dress, honey, you would be saying that's an ignorant or foolish dress.
I'm going to keep that in mind. That's going to come in handy.
Yeah, well, you may have your own little mental reservation, but I would suggest she's not going to take it in that sense, because the word nice does not mean ignorant or foolish in colloquial English. And so if you look at philosophy in terms of what it contains a number of subfields, like epistemology, which is the theory of knowledge, how we know things, axiology, which is the theory of moral values, metaphysics, the theory of what is real, and axiology is actually not just moral values, but also aesthetic values, any kind of values. And so, Psychelit, if we had not fallen, would humans think about how we know stuff?
I think we would. I think you still got to think.
And would we think about what are good and bad values?
Yeah, we would. Yes.
And would we think about what's ultimately real?
Yes, and yes, we would. All these things.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would say that in my view, I would think that if we had not fallen, then philosophy would exist, not just in terms of where it came from, but in terms of what it contains, what it in today's world. I'm sure it would take different forms than the way it's taken in our world. I suspect there would be a lot more consensus in philosophy if we had not fallen. I can't say 100% because we'd still have finite knowledge, and that might lead to some diversity of opinion. But I would say that it looks to me like philosophy would still exist.
It'd probably be a little easier. It'd be a little less frustrating for some of us. Maybe.
We'd just be way better at it.
Yeah, way better at it. Right. Andrew, thank you very much for the question. It's Weird Questions for Jimmy Akin on this Friday the 13th, and we've got an hour more. Well, we've got hours more of them stacked up, but we've got another hour to get through the ones we've got, and we'll do that right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live was a huge part of my coming into the faith a few years ago.
Love the show. Been listening for 2 years. Your show brought me into the Catholic Church.
But they turned me on to Catholic Answers. So I started listening to that.
I was an addict, dude.
Yeah.
I listened to Catholic Answers every
Yeah.
single day. I
Me
would
too.
even wait till it dropped. I'd
Yeah.
get so excited.
Yeah.
It's Pavlovian conditioning.
Right.
10 a.m. in the morning. Here it is.
I just want to say thank you, Trent, for being a great apologist in general. This show ultimately helped me lead to my conversion to the Catholic faith this year.
Yay! Praise God. Welcome home. You guys brought me into the Catholic Church.
Thank you for converting me to Catholicism.
She's the reason I became Catholic like 3 years ago, and I listened to your show.
I'm actually a Protestant pastor, and I love listening to you guys' show for the deep theological conversations you guys have and diving into the Word. I love it.
Catholic Answers was instrumental to my conversion, actually. I was not raised Protestant. I started listening to Catholic Answers about 1.5 years ago, and I'm now being received into the church.
Praise God.
This Easter.
Awesome.
So,
Hi, I'm Cy Kellett, host of Catholic Answers Live. In this video, you'll hear 100 testimonies from people whose lives were changed by Catholic Answers. These are just a small sample of what we've seen God do in tens of thousands of lives through this work over the years. And it's only been possible because of supporters like you. If you're able, please click the link below to support Catholic Answers. As a thank you, we'll send you free books and content to help you grow in your own faith. Thank you for your generosity, and please enjoy these testimonies of 100 lives changed by Catholic Answers.
And I fell away from the faith at 13, right at my confirmation, actually. And I was away for about a decade or so. And when I was coming back, not just intellectually to believe that God exists, but really coming back into the faith in the church, Catholic Answers was a really invaluable resource for me. So I just love it. I recommend it to my listeners and friends and people who write to me. It's just tremendous.
thanks to Catholic Answers as a whole, you've really helped me find Christ in general.
I've been Catholic 3 years now because of you guys, so thank you for that.
Thank you, first of all. You guys are the ones that brought me back to the Catholic faith after being gone for almost 20 years.
Oh, well, welcome home.
After almost a year of research, listening to your show, and praying, I've decided to take steps to join the church. And my fiance...
I sent in a message when I was 14, so several years ago, to Tim Staples, and now I am almost 20 years old, and I'm in RCIA, and I just wanted to thank Tim for everything that he's done and really helped me with my journey. And
wow, thank you so much for sharing that, Kendra. You just made my day, week, month, year. Well, God bless you.
Spending 2 years in the Lutheran tradition, I just kept feeling this tug towards Catholicism. A ton of it had to do with you guys, actually, especially Tim Staples. I was reading Behold Your Mother at that time.
He got
shortly before. He got me. And I talked about this. I read a couple of chapters of that book, and I was like, everything the church says about Mary is probably true. I don't even need to finish this. I'm so convinced because it was just so well reasoned.
I do appreciate you guys so much and what you're doing. I never knew as much about the Catholic faith. I just kind of grew up in it, and it was just like, oh, you know, you're Catholic, and that was it. So you guys have really helped me in coming back and learning a lot about the faith that I'm in. So I really appreciate you guys and your shows. I watch you guys on YouTube all the time.
And I just wanted to say thank you so much to Cy, yourself, Jimmy, and everyone else on the show. When I was initially questioning my Protestantism, the way you guys talk to people on the show and the way you guys conduct yourself was very comforting to me and very welcoming to me.
Yes.
So you guys did a huge, huge role in bringing me back home.
Well, we want to be mean to Protestants, but they don't let us. So
Thank you for your ministry. Thank you for Catholic Answers. It brought me into the Catholic Church from an evangelical background.
I visited a Catholic church. I called up Catholic Answers, and this wonderful Catholic apologist got in touch with a Catholic priest, and I talked with the priest, and I prayed from my heart, Lord, I want to be in your will. I was looking to you all these years. And at 89,
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. That's a little bit of, it's not groovy music. Groovy music's a different thing. That's the weird questions with Jimmy Akin music. Every now and then we get Jimmy in and give him a whole pile of weird questions. And you know Jimmy, he's happy to answer them. He's got answers for them. So we'll get back to that, Jimmy. Thanks for being back for another hour.
Yeah, no problem.
It's like the old days, you doing 4 straight hours with us. I remember that used to be kind of regular for you sometimes.
Yeah, well, I enjoy doing radio, so always happy to.
Well, back to the weird questions we go then. And this one comes from Subtrick 4322. Could zombies get married?
Well, it's going to depend on the type of zombie you're talking about. One of the things that's required for matrimony is the ability to make a rational choice. And there are some zombies, especially fantasy zombies, the kind that don't really exist, that clearly cannot make rational choices. Now, I know there have been, and I'm blanking on the name of it, but I know there have been like zombie rom-coms, you know, where like someone falls in love with a zombie or they fall in love with a girl or something. But I know those exist. I've seen posters for them. I've never watched a zombie movie like that. But I have seen at least a few episodes of The Walking Dead, some of the early first season ones. And I'm pretty sure, the zombies in that, they're not capable of making a rational choice to embrace a partnership of the whole of life oriented towards the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of offspring. So they can't choose marriage, and thus they could not get married. On the other hand, and some zombies, I'd also point out, are actually dead, and dead people can't marry you. So for both reasons, some types of fantasy zombies could not get married. But then we've got to deal with real zombies, because I don't know if you're aware of this, Cy, but there are real zombies. They really exist in Haiti. And I did a pair of episodes about them, of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. It's episode 159 and 160. And in the episode art for one of those episodes, I actually have a picture of a man who's a zombie. His name is Clairvius Narcisse, and he was a native of Haiti. And this was in the mid-20th century, but he came in and to a hospital. He was having a medical emergency, and he died, or at least they thought he died, and they certified him as dead. And this was not some hospital out in the boonies. This was an American-run hospital and so forth. So he had good doctors, and they thought he died. And so then his body was claimed, and he was buried. And then, like years later, he shows up again, and he's alive, and it's Clairvius Narcisse. And he explained that what had happened was he had been zombified. In Haiti, the claim is that there are certain practitioners of magic, like Bokors, who basically use a kind of a drug to ostensibly kill someone. And the person gets buried, and then they come along and they open their grave, and they get the person's body out, and then they enslave the person. And they may give them additional drugs to dull their mind and keep them enslaved. And it is believed that one of the components of the zombie drug is tetrodotoxin, which is a compound that's manufactured by the pufferfish that inhabit the waters off of Haiti. And tetrodotoxin causes paralysis. It is, for example, you may have heard of the Japanese dish fugu, which is pufferfish. And in Japan, where they also have pufferfish, they have this dish. It's considered a delicacy, and it has to be prepared just right. In fact, the chefs who make fugu have to be licensed by the Japanese government, because part of making fugu is you want to prick the poison sac in the pufferfish and get just a little bit of the poison around on the fish, and it has supposed to have this tingly sensation when you eat it. Like you think about like getting pins and needles in your hand when your hand goes to sleep because the blood flow's been cut off.
Right.
Well, something like that. But if they get too much of the poison on the food you're going to eat, you'll die. They even have a Simpsons episode about this. But that's fugu. And so the belief or the proposal is that what the Bokors are doing is they're getting tetrodotoxin from the local pufferfish and other ingredients and combining them to make the zombie drug. And then they give it to someone. That person becomes paralyzed. Their heart rate goes to almost zero, and especially historically, it's been easy for them to be mistaken as dead. So they get buried, and then you come to the grave, you open it, and a lot of their graves are above ground. So you open up the grave, you pull the person out, they revive once the zombie drug wears off. They may have gotten brain damage from the zombie drug, but if you're going to enslave them, you then keep giving them this drug to cloud their mind and make them compliant. And then you take them to your farm or whatever, and you get zombie slave labor out of them. And so zombies are a real social role in Haiti. And Clairvius Narcisse is an illustration, because of the certification we have of his death, that this does really sometimes happen, or something very much like it happens. There are other accounts of people who were zombies and escaped that are not as well documented. But and there are also people who've talked about this who have claimed and I go into this in the Mysterious World episodes. It's 159 and 160 if you want to check them out. But there are people who've said essentially this is a form of punishment. When people get turned into zombies, the people who get zombified tend to be people who are societal troublemakers. And rather than just killing them, zombifying them and is a way to settle them down so they don't cause problems to society. And it's viewed actually by some Haitians as a form of justice to turn someone into a zombie. It's, kind of like sending them to a work farm as a penal sentence. Having said all that, what about these real world zombies that exist? Well, some of them seem to have mental problems and cognitive handicaps that would prevent them from exchanging valid matrimonial consent. You know, like if they got too much of the zombie drug and it caused brain damage or something. On the other hand, others like Clairvius Narcisse, he seemed mentally fine once he got off the zombie drug. At least once he escaped from, the farm where he was, and he stopped taking the supplemental drugs to dull his mind. He seemed fine. And so I would say someone like Clairvius Narcisse, yeah, that kind of zombie, he can get married. If he can exchange valid matrimonial consent, then he can get married.
All right. There was so much more to that zombie answer that I knew was coming. Thank you very much for the question, Subtrick 4322. Actually, let's take a break. We'll come right back. We'll get another weird question in when we get back right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at Magnificat.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
We should pray because prayer is conversation with God, and conversation is the only way to build a relationship. We need that relationship with God. We should pray and talk with God about what's on our hearts, what's on our minds, what's active in our lives, the joys we have. We should share all of these with God. Prayer is conversation, and conversation is the only way to build a relationship with God. It's the most important relationship. All of our other relationships depend on this one.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Weird questions for Jimmy Akin this hour. And we move from zombies to, let's see, to healers. All right, let's see. S. Medrano.
Which you might need if you've been turned into a zombie.
If you've been zombified, well, I don't know if that's the correct modifier, but if you've been zombified, you probably are going to want a healer. So this is a very direct question, Jimmy. Straightforward for you. What person does Jimmy consider a healer?
Jesus.
Yep.
I mean, that's the obvious one to me. Mm-hmm. There are also other figures that are mentioned in the Bible that are reported to have been used in healings, but Jesus is the main one. So, and beyond that, well, there are more recent people who have been credited with healing. Some of them are religious in nature and claim to be channeling God's power, and that's something that I don't dismiss as a possibility, because one of the things that St. Paul does when he's given lists of different gifts of the Spirit is he lists healings as one of the gifts. And so if we have New Testament evidence indicating God gifted certain people with charismatic healing ability, I would expect some people down through every age of church history, including our own day, to have that gift. And so I'm sure there are faith healers today. You could call them a faith healer. Charismatic healers, you could call them that. I think that we'd want to be careful in discerning whether God really is using a person to perform, paranormal healing. This would be paranormal because it's beyond the normal. That's what paranormal means. You could also call it supernatural. But I don't have a problem with this. I also, though, have not researched it in particular. So I don't have an individual today that I would consider a healer. I know there are various people who I've seen videos of who claim to be healing people, various Pentecostal preachers, for example. And some of them may be genuine healers, but a lot of them are also either engaging in wishful thinking and don't really have any healing abilities, or they are, in some cases, outright frauds. And some of them have been caught, committing fraud. So I don't have a problem with this category of person. I just haven't done the research to identify any such individuals. Maybe if in the future I get some terrible, God forbid, but if I get some terrible disease that's not susceptible to conventional medical treatment, I might very well search out such individuals. In addition to those who heal in a religious context, there are also claims that have been investigated in parapsychology of psychic healers, of people who aren't claiming to have a supernatural healing ability, but a natural one that's built into human nature. And there have been studies done of these individuals. Some of them, some very interesting studies, in fact. For example, back, I believe it was in the 1960s, there were a whole bunch of studies done on, and they've been done on plants and animals and humans. A lot of the research is done on plants and animals because you need someone who's sick that you can, and you need replicability, and in order to get replicability, you may not have a good supply of sick humans who have all exactly the same condition.
Oh, right.
That you can all treat in exactly the same way. So it's easier if you've got, let's say, rats, and you can anesthetize the rats, and then say to the healer, okay, we've got these two rats here. We want you to make this one wake up faster. We want you to help him overcome the effects of the anesthetic. And you can do that over and over again without ethical problems. And so that's been done. One of the interesting, and I know someone who did those kind of experiments a number of years ago. One of the interesting things they found is something called the linger effect. They discovered that they would put the rats on like two different little platforms, and they could film all this happening, but they'd put the rats on two different platforms. But you don't want to always be healing the rat on the same platform, so they would randomize, which we want you to heal the right rat, or now we want you to heal the left rat, and so forth. And what they discovered is if the healer had been healing the right rat, it was like some of the healing effect seemed to linger on the right platform. And you put a new rat on that platform, they're going to get better a little quicker, even without the healer doing anything. So it was like the healing effect seemed to linger. And so this became called the linger effect. And there's even more research that has been done that involves something that looks like the linger effect with plants. In this case, there was a whole bunch of experiments that were done with pea plants, where what they would do is they would take a bunch of seeds, and they would put them in a controlled environment. They would put them in put a bunch of them in pots, and they would make sure that the pots were all getting the same amount of light and everything like that. And they blinded the person who was to water them. They all got the same amount of water. They had the same nutrients in the soil, everything like that. But they also put salt in the soil to make it harder for the plants to grow. And so they all get the same amount of salt, so they're all at the same disadvantage. Nobody knows which is the treatment group, and nobody knows which is the control group, and they're all mixed in together. They have letters that have been attached to the pots, and it's only after data collection is over do you find out, okay, A, B, and C, or A, B, and Q, or whatever it was, those were the treatment options, and M, N, and S were all the control options. So nobody during data collection knows which is which. But what they did was they had a guy who was a healer who said, I can charge water. I can put this healing charge in the water, and this would seem to be a form of the linger effect. He's going to put this healing effect. It's going to linger in the water. And this is not dissimilar to using holy oil and things like that as part of a healing ceremony in a religious context. But what this healer said is, I can put this healing effect in the water. And so they had treated water that had that he tried to charge with the healing effect, and they had regular water, which nobody had done anything to. And the worker who puts the water on the pea plants does not know which water is treated and which water is untreated. But what they found was that the pea plants that got treated with the healing water, even though the only difference in the water was the healer had tried to charge it up, the pea plants that got treated with the healing water, they grew better. And once data collection was all over, you measure the heights of the pea plants, and they did better. So there is at least some empirical evidence that could suggest that some humans may have the ability to influence health outcomes. And so I mentioned that as another possibility. Again, since I don't have I don't, at least currently, have some horrible medical condition, it's not something I've investigated specifically. So if you ask me what person, and notice that's suggesting one person, do I consider a healer? Oh, I would say Jesus Christ, the Son of God. He's the great physician.
S. Medrano, thank you very much for the question. We've got time for another before we got to take a break. So we'll take Brett's question. Does the Pope still hypothetically have the power to crown a Holy Roman Emperor?
This can be answered a number of ways. Starting with a simple answer, no, he doesn't have the power to crown the Holy Roman Emperor because the Holy Roman Empire does not exist. And therefore, there is no Holy Roman Empire, so the Pope can't crown him. On the other hand, you could push a little further and say, okay, well, suppose the Holy Roman Empire came back. Could the Pope crown the Holy Roman Emperor in that case? Well, it would depend on what the laws of the Neo-Holy Roman Empire are. If the candidate to be crowned invited the Pope to do the crowning, well, then the Pope would have the ability to crown the new Holy Roman Empire, the new Holy Roman Emperor. So if the invitation is extended and if the invitation is accepted, then yeah, the crowning ceremony could go ahead with the Pope presiding. On the other hand, you need to do more than just extend the invitation. It needs to be accepted. And I could understand a modern Pope not automatically accepting the invitation, because the church is in a phase of its history where it's trying to be neutral with respect to various nation states. It's tolerated, or at least continued, I guess that's a better way to say it, it's continued certain historical practices that speak to special relationships with various states, but it's very hesitant to do new things. But if I talked politics, I would lose half the people I'm trying to serve. And so the Pope has a similar consideration. And I imagine that if a new candidate to be Holy Roman Emperor invited the Pope to crown him, the Pope might very well say, "Thank you, I'm honored, but I think I better not."
That seems fair. If you were a friend of the Pope and he made you Holy Roman Empire, just a Holy Roman Emperor, just with no prep or anything, never, just
snuck up behind you and dropped the crown on your head.
Yeah, and boom, you're Holy Roman Emperor. I just don't think it would stick. I don't think anyone would accept that, even if the Pope did it.
Yeah.
Jimmy Akin, our guest. It's weird questions with Jimmy Akin. Don't worry. I know there are people out there anxious now that the Pope is going to sneak up behind them and crown them Holy Roman Emperor, but it's very
actually
unlikely.
Happened in history.
Oh, it did?
Oh, yeah.
You got to remind me. Wait, who got snuck up on?
I want to say it was Charlemagne. I may be misremembering that.
Oh. Well, if you're going to pick somebody, pick Charlemagne. Not just the janitor or something. Pick Charlemagne to do it. Jimmy, what dropped on Monday or will drop on Monday? You can pick whichever you like on the Jimmy Akin podcast.
So this past Monday on the Jimmy Akin podcast, I had an episode on why Jesus used parables in the Gospels. Why didn't he just tell people what he was teaching straight out? And why does he say he seems to say, I'm using parables so some people won't understand? What's that all about? Coming up this next Monday, I have an episode on who was Jesus's grandfather, because people have pointed to Luke and Matthew's genealogies and said they conflict. Well, they don't. And Jesus's own family had an answer to this.
Check out the Jimmy Akin podcast, YouTube channel, or anywhere where you get podcasts. Right back with more weird questions.
Have you ever wondered about the mysterious, even obscure aspects of the Catholic faith? Dive into the Jimmy Akin podcast, where Jimmy brings together information from many fields as he pushes the boundaries of apologetics. Tune in today to the Jimmy Akin podcast, Mysteries of the Faith, a highly entertaining, informative, and at times humorous show that will help you grow in your faith. Visit JimmyAkinPodcast.com today to subscribe.
Lots of people have big questions about Catholicism. It needs a big book of answers, and now it's got one. The Big Book of Catholic Answers is filled with helpful replies to more than 250 questions about the faith. Questions about God, salvation history, the Creed, the Bible, the list goes on and on. Order your copy of the Big Book of Catholic Answers today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Checking my email during the break to see if I had been crowned Holy Roman Emperor, and I have not. I am still not the Holy Roman Emperor. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and all the questions are in because it's weird questions for Jimmy Akin. And this one comes from Seamus. If you were cast back in time, Jimmy, let's say to medieval Europe, you are captured upon the moment that you materialized in the past and were brought before the king immediately. You have an argument that you can present to the king to prove that you are a time traveler and not, say, a witch. What argument could you use to convince the king that you time traveled? If you fail at the argument, you're burned at the stake. Those are high stakes, says Seamus.
Well, I would say that it's going to depend on the specific circumstances, because not all kings are going to react the same, and they're going to know different things in different years, and they're going to have different mental options available to them in different years. So it really depends on the local jurisdiction. I'd have to know more about the specific time that I've been transported to. I assume if this was a voluntary transport, I would have researched the time, so I'd know where and when I was going and who the personalities were and what the possibilities were, and I actually would contingency plan this before I even went to the past. What am I going to say if I'm outed as a possible time traveler, or what am I going to say if they want to arrest me and throw me in prison or burn me at the stake for being a witch or something. So I would have this all gamed out mentally based on my knowledge of where and when I'm going. On the other hand, if I'm just transported randomly, involuntarily, and I have no ability to research where I'm going, I would, if I'm in the Middle Ages. Now, the Middle Ages are a very considerably lengthy period. They're between about AD 500 and 1500, plus or minus, depending on how you define them. But my manner of speech, if I was transported involuntarily, would itself be a barrier, because I speak with an accent, as does every human being, because an accent is just a pronunciation scheme. But I speak with an accent today that would be the least of my problems. Even if I was transported to the end of the Middle Ages, like let's say I ended up in Britain in the 1400s, okay, my diction and my vocabulary and my grammar are going to be different than what other people are using. And if you go back further to where, and that's even in the 1400s, that's modern English by linguistic standards. It's still not, it's earlier than the King James. So you can imagine I'm going to have some communication challenges. You put me back further into the High Middle Ages, at some point we're going to hit Middle English, and then we're going to hit Old English, which is basically unintelligible. And before 800, we're not even dealing with English anymore. So if I've just been randomly, involuntarily transported with no opportunity for research, they may view me as a foreign idiot who's not able to talk properly.
That's ungenerous.
Or at least just as a foreigner he's some guy, he doesn't speak any language like what we've heard. But assuming that, let's say before I go, someone sticks a Babel fish in my ear. So let's take the communication issues off the table. If I've been randomly transported, my first thought is I might not argue that I'm a time traveler. I might say, I've been bewitched. And I might start blaming a witch for why they saw me suddenly materialize. And I'm more than happy to demonstrate my Catholic faith. I'm not some heretic. I'm not into witchcraft. I ended up here because this is an involuntary transport, right? That's why I don't have it all gamed out. Someone that they would conceptualize as a witch randomly transported me here. It's not my fault. So I might try to convince them that I'd been bewitched rather than be a witch. On the other hand, if I decided to make an argument, I probably would, again, it's going to depend on the circumstances. If I've researched where I'm going to be, then I'm going to know the surrounding history. And actually, part of the research I would do and part of the contingency planning I would do would be to know upcoming events that are going to happen, but that are not otherwise predictable. And I would be able to make a series of predictions and say, I'll show you I'm from the future. This is going to happen tomorrow. This is going to happen next week. This is going to happen 2 weeks from now. This is going to happen next month, and so on, and build up a track record showing that I know the future, at least in this way. And that would help support evidence that I'm a time traveler. Also, I would be inclined, and I would now, if I'm transported involuntarily, I'm not going to be able to do that. At least I'm unlikely to be able to do that because I won't know the historical period well enough. If I don't know the historical period well enough, and I was going to use an argument to try to show I'm from the future, and I can't predict the future, my next best bet would be to share scientific knowledge and that can be demonstrated. So I might, for example, depending on where I am, I might be able to say, okay, if we go to this mine, we're going to be able to get some pitch blende, and I'm going to be able to show you some interesting effects from the mineral pitch blende that were not known at the time, like the ability to fog photographic plates, because pitch blende contains uranium, and nobody knew that before the 1890s. So I could use future scientific knowledge to demonstrate that I'm from the future. Now, that's not going to be a slam dunk. They're not going to, that they're not going to accuse me of being a witch, but at least it would give me an option if I can't predict the future. And even that, as I always say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him think. If they're determined that I'm a witch and they're not open and they're just going to burn me, well, then that's what they're going to do. But these are some of the things that would help a reasonable person give me a chance to not get burned at the stake.
Thank you very much for Seamus for that question. It's baffling. You're sitting here trying to think. I don't even know what that uranium stuff is that you were going to get. So I don't know what I would do. Yeah, I don't pitch blende. I didn't know that it's full of uranium, but
it looks like pitch, in case that helps.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll have a hard time distinguishing it from actual pitch, but all right.
That's why it has the name. Blenda means deceive. So pitch blende. It could deceive you into thinking it's pitch when it's not.
All right, let's go to our next question. Fman 6956 wants to know this. Is there any evidence that ancient humans may have reached a level of technological advancement similar to or even higher than ours, and that this knowledge was somehow lost after the fall or after the Great Flood?
Well, the short answer is no. We don't have any evidence of a comparable technological civilization in our past, much less one with higher technology than what we have now. Sometimes you'll hear claims to the contrary. Like, for example, there's a set of things that are sometimes called UPARTs. UPART is an acronym. It stands for out of place artifact. And sometimes people will claim that these artifacts betray a level of technological development that was not characteristic of the environment we found them in, which is why they're out of place. For example, there is one of the UPARTs that people sometimes point to is known as the Baghdad Battery. And it's something that, hang on, let me get the episode number. Oh, I'm in the wrong spreadsheet. I actually did a Mysterious World on it, and people can learn all about it if they want. It's episode 308. So you can go to mysterious.fm/308 to learn about the Baghdad Battery. But it's an artifact that was found near Baghdad and it's, thousands of years old, and people thought, oh, this is an electric battery. You put an acid in it and put it together the right way, and it'll generate an electric current for you. And so people thought, oh, well, this is a sign of a technology that they didn't have. So it must be a leftover from some greater, more advanced technology that has been lost, that most people in ancient Mesopotamia, which is where Baghdad is, didn't have. But the problem is that's not what the Baghdad battery is. It's not a battery at all. It, in fact, is what's known as a foundation deposit. It's not meant to hold acid. It's not meant to generate an electric charge. It is meant to hold a little scroll that has a magic spell on it. And people in ancient Mesopotamia would bury these in the foundations of new buildings so that the building would succeed and be good for people and stuff. And so that's what it is. It's a foundation deposit. But when it was discovered, people didn't recognize that. And they thought, oh, you put these same components together this other way, you could make a battery if you poured acid into it. Well, that's just not what it is. So we actually don't have any good evidence of there being a comparable or more advanced technological civilization in the past. We do have evidence that goes back further of civilization than many people realized. For example, there's a site in Turkey known as Göbekli Tepe, which is like 12,000 years old, and it's advanced for the time. It's a very impressive structure, but it's still a Stone Age structure. It's not as advanced as we are, or even close to where we are. So it's more advanced than we thought would be what could have existed at the time, but it's still not advanced by our standards. On the other hand, just because we don't have evidence of an ancient advanced civilization, meaning comparable or in advance of where we are, doesn't mean there wasn't one. The idea that there was is actually something that scientists have thought about, and it's referred to as the Silurian hypothesis, after the Silurians, a race from Doctor Who of reptilian beings that existed at the time of the dinosaurs and then went into hibernation. So some scientists, not believing that there was such a civilization, but they've still wondered about, well, if there was an ancient advanced civilization, say, at the time of the dinosaurs, could we detect it? Would we still have evidence of it? And they concluded probably not, because a lot of the traces of that civilization would have vanished. Due to continental drift and various tectonic structures getting subducted or melted down, or concrete crumbling, plastic decaying, chemicals, returning to an undetectable state in the environment, nuclear waste losing its radioactivity. There are a lot of things that today we could detect that would indicate an advanced civilization that over millions of years would cease to indicate an advanced civilization. So I don't have any evidence that there was such a civilization at any point in the history of Earth, but if there was, we wouldn't necessarily be able to detect it.
F-Man, great question. That takes us to the break. We'll be right back with more weird questions for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and His gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
I told him about the woman who came to me and said her two children hadn't spoken to each other for 2 years. Their grandma died, and she was very wealthy. She left half to each one. She said they're arguing over a commode. She said it's inlaid. Can you imagine being in hell and somebody saying to you, what are you here for?
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Jimmy Akin, our guest. Lots of weird questions for Jimmy. This one comes from CJ. CJ says, not quite super weird, but oddly technical, so you might enjoy. We see what CJ thinks that you enjoy, Jimmy, the technical stuff. At the consecration of the Eucharist, the priest is reenacting what Jesus did. But it says he took, broke, gave, and said, and then an ellipsis. Why is the fractioning so much later in Mass? Why is distribution after the blessing of the blessing we are doing what he instructed? Should it not be in the order he instructed? Thanks.
Okay, so I understand what CJ is asking. So when the priest is saying the Eucharistic prayer in Mass, he hits the words of institution. And the words of institution begin on the night he was betrayed, and it talks about how our Lord took bread and broke it. And what CJ is wondering is, why didn't he snap the host in two right there? When he says
right.
Jesus broke it, why didn't he break it there?
Right.
Because that has nothing to do with the origin of the fraction rite, which occurs later in the sequence of the Mass. The fraction rite fulfills an entirely different purpose. It is not meant to symbolize the moment that Jesus broke the bread at the Last Supper. Instead, it originated in one way, and it has a different significance in the liturgy today. The way it originated was this. Now, I am in Fayetteville, Arkansas, my hometown. The next town north of here, well, I guess you could count Lowell, but the next major town north of here is Springdale. And in the ancient world, let's suppose Springdale and Fayetteville existed in the early church. They didn't, of course, because America hadn't been discovered by Europeans yet, but let's suppose they were part of the ancient world. Well, churches wanted to show that they were in communion with each other. We're all Christians, we're all Catholics, we're all in communion with each other. How do you show that? Well, the Eucharist is a sign of communion. If you can take a Eucharist that I, as a priest, consecrated, then you're in communion with me. If I can take communion if I can take a host that you, as a priest, consecrated, then that's a sign I'm in communion with you. That's part of why we use the word communion for receiving the Eucharist. So the Eucharist is itself a sign of communion. So what they did in the early church to show that they were in communion with each other is, if I'm the Springdale priest, I would take a little part, I'd break off a little part of a host I consecrated and send it down to Fayetteville. And the priest in Fayetteville would drop it into his chalice, and then he would receive communion. He would do the same thing. He'd break off a little part of the host in Fayetteville, send it up to Springdale. The Springdale priest drops it in his chalice and drinks it. And so this is a way of being in communion with each other. Well, at some point, apparently, they had a giant ice storm or snowstorm or something like we had here a few weeks ago that stopped the two little bits of the host from getting exchanged. in that way. It became impractical to constantly be sharing these little fractioned pieces of the host with each other. And so it's like, okay, if I'm the Fayetteville priest and the Springdale Eucharistic delivery hasn't arrived, I'll just break off a piece of my own host and drop it in there to signify my communion with the priest in Springdale who wasn't able to get me a piece of his host. And so that's how the fraction rite got into the Mass. It was originally a way of churches showing that they were in communion with each other, but for practical reasons, it ended up being just an individual priest doing this. However, once it became standard that I, as a priest, just break off a bit of my own host and drop it in, it needs a new significance. Because if nobody's sharing these little pieces of the host anymore, then, but I'm doing it anyway, I need to explain it in some other way. And the way that was chosen, and this is what it symbolizes in the current liturgy, is the resurrection of Christ. Because, Jesus's body and blood are not really separate from each other. Wherever you have his body, you've got his blood. But when Jesus was on the cross, he bled. And so, they drove nails in him to make sure he would. And so his body and blood were to a degree separate from each other on the cross, even though he still had blood inside his body. Well, that then reflects what Jesus did in instituting the Eucharist, where the host, that signifies his body and actually becomes his body, and the contents of the chalice signify his blood and actually become his blood. And even though they were to a degree separate when he was dying on the cross, at the resurrection they got back together, and they're back together today. So by today, when the priest drops a piece of the host into the chalice, he is symbolically reuniting the body and blood of Christ, and it's a symbol of the resurrection. So it has nothing to do with Jesus breaking the bread. It has to do with symbolizing the resurrection, which is why it occurs so much later.
CJ, I think you were right. I think Jimmy did like that technical question. Thanks very much. Here's another weird one. This one comes from Libby. How much water can a priest bless in one time? Presumably, they cannot bless the whole ocean, so how far is their reach in this regard?
Well, I would say that in principle, there's no reason why a priest couldn't bless an ocean. In principle, there's a qualifier I'm going to get to in a minute. But what you're doing when you're blessing something is you're asking God to use it for the good of man. And so you're essentially praying over it. And, if I have, this is not an ocean, but I've got a can of Zevia soda here, if I had a priest here, I could ask him to bless the Zevia soda and ask God to use it to properly hydrate my body. Well, okay. If we had an ocean here, I could ask the priest to bless the ocean, and that'd just be praying over the ocean, saying, God, please help, this ocean benefit people. May it benefit fishermen. May it benefit, oceanic explorers. May it benefit scientists. May it benefit transpo people. May it benefit all these different people, and may the fish in the ocean be blessed, and so forth. You're just asking. That's what a blessing is. Benedicere in Latin, it just means to speak well of. You're asking God to use this thing to do good or to make things well by using it. So I don't think there's any limit in principle on the ability to pray over anything. You could bless the whole universe and ask God to use it to do good. But I think that given that it has not developed as a custom for Catholic priests or other Catholics to do that there may be an implicit limit that is envisioned by the Church's law. However, the Church has not defined what that limit is. And so I would say that if a priest did like try to bless the entire Pacific Ocean, let's say, and make it all holy water, I could imagine the Rhoda over in Rome saying, yeah, no, that didn't have its effect. The entire Pacific Ocean is not holy water now. But thus far, the legislator, the Pope, has not defined what the limits of such a blessing are. And so I would say this is an open question that cannot be answered until we get further clarification from the legislator about how far he wants the blessing to extend.
Libby, you left us with a cliffhanger. We need the Pope to answer this one. Since he's not going to be assigning anybody Holy Roman Emperor, he's probably got time for this one. So thanks, Libby. Jimmy Akin, thank you very much for 2 great hours of weird questions with Jimmy Akin.
My pleasure.
That will do it for us. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.